Did you know that the relationship between Max Verstappen and Christian Horner is on the verge of breaking down after the 2025 Spanish GP? A penalty, an ambiguous message, and a strategic error could change the course of his career. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, do you think Verstappen is losing patience with Red Bull? What's really going on inside the team that has been dominant for years? In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at the growing tension between Max Verstappen and Christian Horner after the 2025 Barcelona Grand Prix. We'll see what happened, how both sides reacted, and what consequences it could have for Verstappen's future in Formula One. To understand Max Verstappen's current situation at Red Bull Racing, we must first consider the enormous contrast between the team's recent dominance and the reality they face in the 2025 season. From 2021 to 2024, Verstappen was not only the most dominant driver in Formula One, but he also cemented himself as the absolute center of the Red Bull project. With 4 consecutive world titles, a crushing technical advantage over his rivals, and a team structure built around him, it seemed that nothing and no one could threaten his reign. However, all that began to change at the start of this season. The loss of key figures, such as Adrian Newey, considered the architect of the team's recent success, was the first sign of a deeper shift. Added to this were a series of questionable strategic decisions and a car, the RB21, that simply doesn't live up to its predecessors. Instead of setting the pace as in previous years, Red Bull has become a reactive team, trying to catch up with McLaren and Ferrari, who have taken advantage of the new regulations more effectively. Within this scenario, Max Verstappen finds himself in a very different position than in previous years. Accustomed to having a competitive car on virtually every circuit on the calendar, he is now forced to compensate for the car's shortcomings with his individual talent. And although he continues to perform at a very high level, other people's mistakes, pit wall decisions, and technical limitations are beginning to wear on his patience. The tension is evident. In the past, any mistake was quickly absorbed by the superiority of the team. Today, every error has direct consequences on the track and in the overall standings. The Spanish Grand Prix was a clear example of this new reality, not only because of the incident with George Russell that cost him a penalty and a guaranteed podium finish, but also because of the way the overall race strategy was managed. For the first time in a long time, Verstappen wasn't the driver in complete control of the situation, and that has left its mark both within the team and on public perception. What was once a solid, well-coordinated structure now appears to be slowly fragmenting. And when the core of that structure, the relationship between driver and team boss, begins to show cracks, alarm bells ring throughout the paddock. Following the incident with George Russell, for example, Horner claimed that Max had apologized internally and that he understood the context of the maneuver. However, on his social media, Verstappen completely avoided a direct apology, simply saying that it shouldn't have happened. This lack of alignment between the statements reveals a gap in the team's narrative, one that has not gone unnoticed by the specialized press or the most attentive fans. Furthermore, there is a key factor fueling these theories: Jos Verstappen, Max's father. His closeness to Helmut Marko, Red Bull's senior advisor and one of the most influential men in the paddock, has led to the belief that there is some kind of internal block within the team that could disagree with the current direction Horner is trying to impose. Some Austrian journalists have gone further, claiming that Mark Mateschitz, the main shareholder of Red Bull GmbH, has lost some of his confidence in Horner following the poor results and the departure of Adrian Newey. Although these claims have not been officially confirmed, the way they are being spread suggests there is something deeper brewing behind the scenes. Within Red Bull, attempts have been made to maintain a public stance of calm and control. Christian Horner, as usual, has acted as a media containment force, insisting that there is no fracture in the relationship with Max Verstappen and that the team remains united around a common goal. In his most recent statements, he reaffirmed that Verstappen is 100% committed and that rumors about his possible departure are nothing more than unfounded external noise. However, a closer look at the language used by both Horner and the driver himself reveals nuances that reveal a much more complex reality. The defensive tone, the need to insist on the driver's loyalty, and the lack of clear messages from Max reveal that something is not working as it should within the team. On Verstappen's part, communication has been particularly revealing. After the Spanish Grand Prix, His reaction was measured, calculated, almost diplomatic. Instead of conveying a strong message of support for the team or acknowledgement of his own guilt in the incident with George Russell, he opted for an ambiguous phrase. "This shouldn't have happened." This distance in his language contrasts with other stages of his career, where he tended to be more visceral and direct. It's not just about what he said, but what he chose not to say. There was no open defense of a team strategy, nor words of support for Horner or his engineers. That silence has been interpreted by many as a sign of distrust, or at least discomfort. From within the team, some sources have begun to leak that the relationship between Verstappen and Horner has become more professional than personal, and that Adrian Newey's departure has left a void not only technically, but also in the internal power dynamics. Newey, as a mutually respected figure, often acted as a silent balancer, someone who could influence both the technical approach and the human relations within the team. Without his presence, it seems that tensions have begun to surface without that natural filter. The chain of command at Red Bull, which for years seemed solid, is now fragmented into different lines of thought, and this inevitably affects the way critical decisions are made. Another important aspect is public perception. Red Bull has always been a very image-conscious team, both with the media and with sponsors. And Verstappen, as the main face of the brand, is a fundamental part of that strategy. The lack of synchronization in the messages conveyed by the team and the driver creates a dissonance that does not go unnoticed. Added to this is Max's recent direct criticism of the media coverage, calling it noise that means nothing. Although he tries to downplay it, it's clear he's feeling the weight of expectations and isn't entirely comfortable with the narrative that has developed around his future. This discomfort, though silent, has repercussions in the high-pressure environment of modern Formula One. The problem for Red Bull isn't just that there are differences, something that can happen at any top-level team. The real risk is that those differences are becoming structural. When a driver like Verstappen begins to second-guess pit wall decisions, when he openly questions the car's performance, or is skeptical of technical updates, what's at stake isn't just a one-off result, but the basic trust that unites driver and team. That trust is the invisible fuel that allows a project to function even in difficult times. Without it, any setback can turn into a crisis. And right now, that trust is being tested in a way not seen since Max Verstappen joined the team. Looking ahead, what happens in the short term could mark a turning point not only in Max Verstappen's career, but in the balance of power across the entire Formula One grid. The tension within Red Bull is not an isolated incident, but rather a reflection of a structure under pressure from both internal and external factors. If the team wants to retain its main figure, it's not enough to simply improve the car or implement new aerodynamic parts. The real challenge is to demonstrate to Verstappen that there is a competitive, cohesive project with a clear vision for the future. Because without that conviction, any signed contract loses value compared to the possibility of winning titles elsewhere. The upcoming Grands Prix will be crucial. Canada, Austria, and Silverstone are presented as venues where Red Bull must not only demonstrate technical progress, but also stability in its strategic management. Every decision in the pits, every aerodynamic modification, every radio message will be analyzed in detail by Verstappen and those around him. Any sign of improvisation, any lack of synchronization in decision-making can be interpreted as an indication of institutional weakness. And in this sport, elite drivers don't hesitate to make drastic decisions when they sense their competitive window could be shortening. Verstappen has shown on more than one occasion that his voice and willpower don't waver when something isn't working. It's important to understand that it's not just about immediate race results. Max needs a clear projection for 2026, the year in which new technical regulations will come into force that promise to reshape the category. The big question surrounding him is whether Red Bull is truly prepared for this transition, or if the departure of key figures like Adrian Newey has left a void that the team has yet to fill. Because planning for 2026 doesn't start in January of that year, it starts now. Every second lost today is ground lost tomorrow, and Verstappen knows this perfectly well. Furthermore, the Formula One environment is more dynamic than ever. With teams like Aston Martin investing aggressively and Mercedes undergoing a post-Hamilton restructuring, opportunities for a driver of Max's caliber are plentiful. In that sense, The lack of a forceful statement closing the door to a possible exit only fuels the fire. While Horner repeats that Max is committed, the driver remains strategically silent, observing, analyzing, and waiting for the right moment to make a decision that could redefine his career and the F1 landscape. In this context of uncertainty and pressure, Red Bull has only one option: to demonstrate with actions that it remains the best place for Verstappen to compete at the highest level. And that isn't achieved with words or public relations alone. It's built race by race, decision by decision. If they manage to redirect the technical course and rebuild internal confidence, the project could still be saved. But if the mistakes persist and tensions deepen, then we are likely facing the beginning of the end of an era. The set of signs is all too evident: internal tensions exposed after the Spanish Grand Prix, ambiguous statements that don't close any doors, strategic errors that undermine the driver's confidence in the team, and above all, a growing feeling that the structure that sustained 4 consecutive championships is beginning to crack. What seemed like an invincible machine is now facing serious cracks, both technically and humanly, and the central figure of this tension is none other than Max Verstappen. The decisions he makes in the coming months could not only define his career, but completely transform the balance of power within Formula One. Reviewing everything we've analyzed, it's clear that Red Bull is at a critical juncture. On the one hand, it has the resources, experience, and a recent track record that positions it as one of the most successful teams of the modern era. On the other hand, he faces technical challenges he couldn't resolve in a timely manner, an internal reorganization following the departure of key players, and a relationship with his star driver that no longer seems to be built on an unshakable foundation. Verstappen, who previously seemed completely integrated into the project, now shows signs of caution. The silence, hesitation, and restrained language with which he refers to his team indicate that he is carefully evaluating every step. And when a driver of his caliber begins to consider alternatives, it is because he perceives that the stability he needs to continue winning is at risk. This scenario leaves us with a central question that, until recently, would have seemed exaggerated but is now completely valid. Are we facing the beginning of the end of the Verstappen-Red Bull era? The upcoming races will not only determine positions in the standings, but also the future of one of the most successful duos in recent motorsport history. And beyond on-track performance, what will make the difference will be the team's ability to rebuild trust, align goals, and offer its driver a clear vision of the future. Without that, any result will be insufficient. Verstappen isn't in Formula One to resist, he's here to dominate. If Red Bull doesn't give him the conditions, someone else will. And now it's your turn. I want to know what you think. Do you think Verstappen should stay at Red Bull and embark on a rebuild? Or do you think his time is coming to an end and it's time for a new challenge in his career? Leave me your answer in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more analyses like this, with up-to-date information, in-depth context, and no empty speculation. Because if Formula One has taught us anything, it's that behind every race, there's always a much bigger story to tell.